day many will not forget, including the media. Israel says Hamas killed over 1,000 people and took many hostages. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu quickly called an emergency meeting. The decision was taken and the directives were clear. Israel was going to launch attacks on Gaza to try and rescue the hostages.
The siren sounded. So I got up and I rushed into my daughter's room. I said to my daughter, she's 12 years old, we need to go to the safe room. So we went downstairs and we waited. And this was a whole ruse. These rocket attacks against Israel was a ruse to breach the perimeter of Gaza and attack and butcher and mutilate. And there have been reports of beheading and reports of rape and reports of these atrocities and crimes.
This was the beginning of a massive destruction in Gaza, and many lives were lost as airstrikes continued.
We were having 100,000 martyrs killed brutally by the Israeli invasions since 1967. And then this is a continuous crime where it has been witnessed by the international community. Unfortunately, the international community, the United Nations, which they are continuously giving their own statements of condemnation to those atrocities and the war crimes being perpetrated by Israel, they fail to push Israel to abide by the international law and the international will to move and finish the occupation.
The international community called for ceasefire, but they were not successful. South Africa stepped in, asking the International Court of Justice at The Hague in the Netherlands to get involved. South African legal team argued for an action.
South Africa is not alone in drawing attention to Israel's genocidal rhetoric against Palestinians in Gaza. 15 United Nations special rapporteurs and 21 members of the United Nations working groups have warned that what is happening in Gaza reflects a genocide in the making and an overt intent to destroy the Palestinian people under occupation.
Israel's lawyers defended their country's actions.
Israel is engaged in a difficult and tragic armed conflict. South Africa ignores this factual context, which is essential in order to comprehend the situation, and also ignores the applicable legal framework of international humanitarian law. It makes a mockery of the heinous charge of genocide. As Israel has previously stated before this court, when dealing with the law, facts matter. Truth should matter. Words must retain their meaning.
At the United Nations, attempts to pass resolutions failed because powerful countries could not agree. Former South African President Kgalema Motlanthe spoke about the growing number of deaths.
The facts in both occupied West Bank as well as Gaza don't admit to a two-state solution. Essentially, if there were brave people on both sides, brave leadership, they would settle for a one-state federal type solution rather than now, because it's clear you have the Israelis clearly trying to push out all Palestinians to where nobody knows.
Former President Thabo Mbeki praised South Africa for using international platforms to try to stop the violence.
Well, it was very correct for South Africa to go to the International Court of Justice and to present the matter as was presented. And I think the International Court took very important decisions, which presented a very important challenge to the Israeli leadership. Because as you remember, the court said, please, you leadership of Israel, act in a manner such that you protect these rights and so on of the Palestinian people. So long as the rights of the Palestinian people have not been recognized, so long will the Palestinians continue to struggle for their rights. And it doesn't matter how many you kill. I'm saying the violence is not going to stop any problem. If the Israeli leadership think that by doing what they're doing today in Hamas against Israeli people, against Hamas and so on, if they think it's going to solve the problem, it isn't.
The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for peace, but his pleas were ignored. Mediation efforts by Egypt, Qatar, and the United States of America brought a brief ceasefire. During this time, Hamas freed some hostages and Israel released Palestinian activists from prisons. But soon after, fighting started again, causing even more deaths.
I think it's important, first of all, to recognize that the ceasefire in Gaza is the product of the work of many, and I would praise the United States, Qatar and Turkey for their efforts for months and months and months to obtain the release of hostages, that, by the way, should be immediate and unconditional, and also to obtain the ceasefire. But the negotiations were dragging. And then, all of a sudden, it happened. I think there was a large contribution of the robust diplomacy of the, at the time, President-elect of the United States. I feel that when we had the position of Israel still reluctant to the ceasefire just 2 days before it happened, and then all of a sudden there was an acceptance, I think that we have witnessed an example of robust diplomacy that is something that we must recognize.
Last week, a ceasefire agreement was signed by Hamas and Israel. Both sides agreed to another ceasefire and the implementation started. However, there was a delay. And finally, there was movement. Hamas released 3 hostages, while on the other hand, Israel released Palestinian activists from prison. This weekend, the second phase of the ceasefire is expected to continue. This will lead to the third phase that includes a final solution to the long conflict in the Middle East. The current president of the United States of America, Donald Trump, had this to say about ceasefire.
I'm not confident, but I think they're very weakened on the other side.
You support the two-state
Gaza, boy, I looked at a picture of Gaza. Gaza is like a massive demolition site. That place it's really got to be rebuilt in a different way.
Sophie, Mokoena, SABC News, Johannesburg.